Good morning. Good morning. If we're going to talk about relating, let's relate right away. Because we all know that our relationships are central in our life. We know that we feel miserable if they're not going well. And we know that we've actually never gone to school to study relationships. If there's a topic about which we're supposed to know how to do it, just like that, one of them is relationships. And you come as entrepreneurs, as creatives, as thinkers, and it looks sometimes that you're coming for ideas. But underneath, we are probably all looking for community and for people to connect to. So I was thinking, what's made relationships so different today? Why is this whole adventure of relating different? And I want to do a quick little exercise with you first. I want you to think of a moment. You can do this eyes open and eyes closed. I can't see you, so we're fine. And think of a moment when you felt deeply connected, secure, stable, connected as in you're sitting there with your grandma or grandpa and there's nothing that needs to happen. You just enjoy being in their presence. You don't know how much more time you will have with them. Connected as in you're with a little baby in your arms and that adoring gaze is plenty. You don't need more. Connected because you know you're there as a friend and you're giving your friend a back so that they can collapse and you will help them while you remain strong for them. Connected because you've just celebrated with your partners the launch of a new idea about which you have been sweating and sweating. But think of a moment of deep connection and just identify one emotion and then locate it in your body. You got it? It's a very quick one. There are many, but you anchor one of them. Anchor it. And then walk with me to the other spectrum of life. And I'd like you to think of a moment when you felt intensely adventurous, bold, daring, able to throw yourself into the unknown, take a risk, be open, be vulnerable, express desires that you usually thwart. Make yourself available in ways that you don't usually do. Go over to somebody that you've been meaning to speak to but have always felt shy to do. And identify one feeling, one emotion, one physical response that goes with that aspect of life. And anchor. And just remember them for a moment. Security and adventure. Because we all come into this world straddling this paradox, the fundamental paradox of our life and of our relationships. How at the same time to experience closeness, connection, security, dependability, predictability, and at the same time also have freedom and expansion and discovery and the known and the unknown and the risk and the discovery and the exploration, all of that. And some of you come out of your childhood wanting more of that stability, more of that protection, more of that anchoring. And others come out wanting more space and more freedom and more movement. But we all have both. And entrepreneurs and creatives and people who live and work and think more outside structures, established structures, usually gravitate to the side of the adventure. In fact, so much so that it is high reward, high risk, crippling self-doubt, unorthodox hours, constant challenge of oneself, and an enormous amount of passion. Passion, which, by the way, always goes hand in hand with the amount of uncertainty that you can tolerate. And so you take what I have come to call the erotic intelligence, which is not about sex only. It's our ability to maintain a sense of aliveness, of vibrancy, of vitality, of energy. And that is enclosed in that passion that so many of you are bringing to your startups, to your endeavors, to your creative projects. The problem is that sometimes there is so much of that creativity, that novelty, that focused attention, that single-mindedness that takes place on that side, that many of you bring the leftovers to your relationships, with your friends, with your partners, and with yourself. Erotic intelligence here, passion here, flatness there. Oh, because you will say, because in my work, in my project, I get a reward for all my efforts, whereas there is no incentive at home. There is no incentive in my relationships. Or they kind of can wait. They can last and kind of live on their own like a cactus in the desert until the day that I choose to come back. But sometimes there is not enough to come back to. And then what do we say? I get more here. I'll stay on this side of life, and I'll continue to immerse myself into my work. If there is an aspect in which many of us here are sometimes not attentive enough, it is relationships. And yet there's no app for it. And yet many of you probably have studied apps way more, many more hours than you have ever been a student of relationships. And I ask yourself, how much effort, how much diligence, how much of that uninterrupted, unfragmented attention you actually bring to your study of being a better person, a better partner, a better lover, a better friend, a better parent, and a better child yourself. Because ultimately, it is that will give you a sense of meaning beyond just being a good professional. It becomes being a good person. And why is that so difficult today? Because when the question I ask myself is, so how do we get there? And there are a few main changes I want to highlight, because I actually really prefer a conversation with you than another little talk about this. But there are a few things that really stand out. And I think that this environment actually highlights that. We've gone from a communal life to an autonomous life. We've gone from villages and communities where we got a sense of belonging and a sense of who we are by virtue of our adherence to that community. So we paid a price, very little freedom, but at least I knew who I was. On the video we just saw, the amount of decisions that people have to make in that video. You need to know if you're bored at your job so that you can quit it. You need to know what you actually like so that you can claim it. You need to know what is good for you to eat so that you can focus on that. The amount of burdens of selfhood that we are living with today has reached an apex of folly. On the one hand, I get the total freedom, but for the first time, I have to decide how much I want to work, how much I want to sleep, how much I want to exercise, how much I want to eat, and how much I want to fuck. It's a lot of decisions to make for one person. It's all on me. The project of identity rests on us. And not only that, but in this competitive consumer environment, I am constantly being evaluated. I evaluate myself, and most of the time I think I'm not good enough. And I evaluate many of the other people, and certainly my prospective partners, and much of the time I think there may be a FOMO piece going on here, and maybe they're not good enough either. And so we are in this non-stop evaluation competition, with one place only, by the way, where the contest finally stops, and it's called love. In love, I finally know that I am the chosen one, and I can stop the process of evaluating myself, because you, my beloved, are going to confer on me my total sense of self-worth. Because intimacy, that used to be we live together, we work the land together, we share all the hardships of life, has taken on this fantastic new meaning that is called intimacy. Intimacy, so that when I talk to you, you are going to validate me. And what is it that I'm going to actually share with you, for which I'm going to be chosen? This fantastic new term called my authentic self. I don't come to you with my social class and with my parents' social class and with all that stuff that's been given to me at birth, with all these attributions. I come to you with my inner life. And my inner life is my essence. And therefore, when you choose me, I feel like I won the contest. But boy, when you reject me, it is rejection at my most authentic too. So we have never been more vulnerable to relationships, because we are chosen at our most authentic and rejected at our most authentic. So much so that many of us would rather postpone our relationships, certainly our love relationships, but even our friendships. There is something more clear in the structure of my work, where I go, I perform, and I get a reward for knowing what I need to do. How am I going to do thriving relationships? Thriving relationships where people feel respected, where people feel acknowledged, where people feel at the same time that they get that sense of anchor and that they can also get the freedom and the possibility to move and to come back. Thriving relationships where I can repair, meaning that shit will happen, but we know how to put the pieces back together. There is no relationship without power and without conflict. But there is a big art of knowing how to repair them. Thriving relationships in which I ask myself, what do you expect of me? And not, how do I get my needs met with you? Which is more often what we're talking today. Thriving relationships in which you ask yourself, who do I bring to my relationships, to my friendships, to my partnerships, to my love life? And do I bring my best self? Or is my best self left there at the studio, at the office, and the one that comes home is the one that is more than happy to fall flat, to have no energy, and to just say, you know, we'll do it tomorrow. So then I ask myself, when you get a text from your partners, we'll do it tomorrow, can be anything, talk, sleep, make love, you can decide what the postponement is. But the idea is that your customers probably get a text back within a minute. And you ask yourself if the people of your life are also getting a text back within a minute. If you find that your customers get a polished, charming, attentive, focused, interested, good listener person, but that the people that you live your life with get less than that, time to transfer some of the goodies on the other side. And since you laugh, you probably have recognized something. I hear it. So, I want to ask you the question. What is it that you anticipate and expect when you think about your relationship? It's plural. Do you imagine people interested in you? Do you imagine that you would be a good listener and that they would listen to you? Do you imagine that you are generous? Do you imagine that instead of being completely captive to the self-actualized self, the one who knows himself or herself, you are also able to actually enter the position of the transcendent self, which is the one who is actually thinking about knowing the other, not about knowing yourself. Not about surrounding yourself with the people that make you happy only, but becoming a participant in another person's happiness. What are your expectations when you enter relationships at this point, in terms of who you are and in terms of what you expect other people to be with you, not just for you? There's a mic, and I would love to hear from you. And by the way, that's my question to you, but you can have plenty of questions to me. We have a few minutes to actually talk together. And now there are... So typically, if I could, I would come down and then So, tell me. Yes?
First, thank you. That was just extraordinary.
Can you bring the mic a little closer? And
Certainly.
Say your name.
My name is
Esther.
My name is Ted.
Hi, Ted.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I try to bring as much creativity home as I put into my work, I fail miserably at that. I need your help.
An honest man or person. So here's the thing. I don't know squat about you, okay? So I may totally talk off track. But my sense of how, when one says I try to bring it, it's really this. To me, there are a few pieces that I notice. When you were thinking about a moment when you feel deeply connected, you probably are not multitasking. You probably are not doing this while you say, I'm listening, you know. You probably are not in an uninterrupted state of attention, and you're deeply curious. Curiosity and creativity, you all know, go together. The challenge is how do you remain, see, because you're involved in a lot of new stuff, it's very easy to be curious. And when you get bored, a lot of the people here, you have a generation of delete, switch. What you don't know so much is how to reinvent on location, how to bring your imagination without having to go elsewhere. And that means that you have to find a way to bring that curiosity into a place that you already think is so familiar. And that therefore you don't really need to be so curious about because you already know. And if you actually can imagine that the mystery is right next to you, that the people that are next to you are forever unknown and forever elusive and forever actually still able, if you pay attention in that way, that's the first step of the creativity. So you don't come home with stupid questions so much, you know, well, how was your day, how was this, what that. You actually do what many people do when they go out with friends and they're in a relationship, which is that you can suddenly hear your partner talk about very intelligent stuff, very interesting things, because they're talking to another person. And then you go back in the car and you say, oh, I didn't know you had read that book. I didn't know you were interested in it. You know that band. You've been to that show. You know, who have you been living with? But, you know, typically you enter the car and instead of continuing that conversation with that kind of energy, it becomes, so what are we doing tomorrow morning? And who's picking up what? So I think that in the world of your apps, and this is my one little thing that I actually have found very amusing for some. Everything I say works great for some people and is totally nil for others, just so you know. There's no answer here. But I think that since you have so many phone numbers and so many gadgets, there is a great thing to actually have a separate phone number or a separate email address for the person that you live with, if that's what you're talking about, in which you are not allowed to ever talk about Management Inc. So you can't talk about who's doing what, who's picking up what, the shopping, the fixing, the this, the that. It's an address in which when something arrives, I know that it's just because you're thinking of me, not because you need something from me. And then you are not in the realm just of love and caretaking and management, but you're in the realm of desire. That's one. Yes, up front. Are you up? Are you awake? You need just to do this a second and get some energy in your bodies, please. You seem very static to me, you know. Yes, move, because emotion and motion, they go together. Yes.
Hi, I'm Craig.
Why don't you stand up so they can all hear you too?
Hi. What happens when things go too far?
As
when
what?
they turn black. Somebody after a long period of time is making a move to just completely leave, but you're still involved in the relationship. The relationship still matters, but it's over. It's the signs of finality are present. And the exit, at least for one partner, is there. There's no more opportunity, it seems, to intervene.
It seems.
Well, optimism is the last refuge of the hopeless, I think.
So the question is, what does one do when one is faced with another person who seems to be on their way out? Is that the question? Yes? It's fine. That's a way of understanding the question. So my first question always is this: how much do you want to fight? how much do you want to fight for this? All the way, blood, sweat, and tears, without any guarantee. Except that when you look back at yourself later on, you say, I did everything I could. The second thing is, how much are you willing to fight and abdicate being right? Because it's very easy to be right, but then you are right and alone. So if it's to repeat one more time stuff you've been saying for the last umpteen years or umpteen days, then you forget it. So it's really about kind of swallowing it for a moment and just saying, obviously the other person has probably been trying to tell me something and I'm not getting it, which is a fair bet. It's true on both sides. But you basically say the one that takes action is the one that has power. That's really important to understand. It's not the reverse. We often think that the one who says, I'm sorry first, takes action first, is weak and vulnerable. Niet. It is totally the opposite. You know, the next thing is you ask that person, is there anything that I could do that would give this a chance? And then you throw yourself at it, even if you think it is totally meaningless. You have to be able to imagine that what you think is frivolous is utterly essential for another person. And it has nothing to do with the specific content. Because probably one of the most important rules of relationships is that the content matters much less than the form. If your form is right, you can discuss all kinds of things. If the form is wrong, you can talk about sex or the children, money, or your parents, or Greenpeace in South Korea, and it will all sound the same. So we get very attached to the content and to the facts. So the next thing is to know that in most relationships, 90% is pseudo-factual talk. When I tell you what happened, it's just my experience of what happened. And when I tell you the truth, it's just my vision of the truth. And if we are polarized, I tend to think that there's only one brain that functions and it's mine. Therefore, I know and you're stupid. You get all of these dynamics, yeah? So the next thing is, you move from two main things, from blame to appreciation, and from reactivity to reflectivity. Instead of reacting, you begin to reflect. And the best way to reflect is probably just to repeat what you've heard so that it helps you enter into the skin of the other. Ultimately, empathy is essential to the ability to repair. And that's, in a nutshell, some of the fundamentals of how you fix. Yes, we have one more. Where is it? There, in the back. I love it. It's like men asking me questions about relationships. Now this is this week, yes, exactly. For whoever ever thought that this stuff is soft, it is not. Yes.
Well, that just means because some of us know that we don't know. That's why.
That is very humble of you.
You use the phrase, how you want to participate in somebody else's happiness.
How I say it again?
You used the phrase a little while ago, it may be a question of how you want to participate in someone else's happiness.
Yes.
So I wanted you to say a little more about that.
Yes.
Because a very bright woman I know once made the observation that an expectation is a resentment under construction. And when you say participate in someone else's happiness, there are implied assumptions and expectations in what is that.
Right.
So I just wanted you to talk a little more about what is that.
Beautiful. So I have exactly 10 seconds. Woof! 15. No, this thing is going in reverse order. It's doing nice things to me. It's going up instead of down. So here's the thing. When I say how you want to participate in another person's happiness, it's really this. How meaningful do I want to be in the architecture of this other person's life? If you want to take the construction metaphor, is I want to be a pillar or a brick or just a bolt, but who do I want to be in the construction of your life, in the narrative, in the story of your life? The happiness piece to me is actually a little secondary. It's more the well-being of the other person and how meaningful I want to be to that person. The issue about happiness, which we could have a whole talk just on that baffles me, is that it used to belong to the heavens, this thing called happiness, and basically it was for the afterlife. And then we brought it down to earth and we made it a possibility. And now it's a mandate. And pretty much we suffer from not being happy. And that is a terrible state. So we may need at this moment, you're doing two amazing movements. One movement you're doing is you're going back from having been the generation, many of you, who are the most free, the most autonomous, the most able to do what you want, and you're looking for multiple ways to reconnect, because basically we are wired for connection from the cradle to the grave. And the second thing you're doing is you're taking off the meaning of happiness as this I feel great into the I feel meaningful. And I am meaningful, and what I do is meaningful, and I seek that sense of purpose with others. And those are two amazing projects. Thank you very much.